"You're a disgrace. Don't come home," my father warned before Mom's birthday. But at the party, my sister's boyfriend turned to me and said, "Hello, boss." The whole room froze. Their true faces were finally revealed. The silence in my apartment felt heavier than usual that evening. My phone buzzed against the glass coffee table, Dad's name flashing on the screen like a warning. I almost didn't answer. 3 months since we'd spoken, and now, 2 days before Mom's birthday, he suddenly wanted to talk? The familiar knot formed in my stomach as I swiped to accept the call. Jake. No hello, no how are you, just my name, spoken like an accusation. Dad's voice carried that same disapproving tone that had followed me throughout childhood, through college, and now into my 30s. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear and moved to the window. Watching the Seattle skyline glitter in the distance, "I'm calling about your mother's birthday," he continued without waiting for my response. "She's been asking if you're coming." There was a bitter edge to his words, the unspoken message clear. "She wants you there, but I don't." I leaned my forehead against the cool glass. I was planning to drive down Saturday morning. The silence stretched between us for 3, 4, 5 seconds. Then came the words that shouldn't have hurt after all these years but somehow still cut deep. "You're a disgrace to this family, Jake. Don't come home. Your mother will understand." My hand tightened around the phone. 10 years of building my business from nothing, the countless nights of work, the risks, the ultimate success, none of it mattered to Howard Nelson. In his eyes, I'd failed the moment I chose my own path instead of joining his accounting firm, the prestigious Nelson and Hayes, where generations of Nelson men had worked, where I was supposed to claim my birthright as the heir apparent. "Dad, it's Mom's 60th birthday," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm coming." I ended the call before he could respond, dropping my phone onto the couch like it had burned me. I set my alarm for early Saturday morning. The 3-hour drive from Seattle to the small town of Riverview would give me plenty of time to prepare myself for whatever waited at my childhood home, whatever Dad had planned to make me regret ignoring his warning. The irony of my current success wasn't lost on me as I settled into my corner office Monday morning. 5 years ago, I was working out of my garage apartment, eating ramen and coding until my eyes burned. Now, NeuroSync occupied the 14th floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise, and I had a team of 37 people who believed in my vision for revolutionizing inventory management systems. "There's someone here you should meet," Rachel said, poking her head into my office. As my operations director and first hire, she'd earned the right to interrupt my morning coffee ritual. "New developer, I think you'll like." The young man who followed her in stood tall but not overly confident. Firm handshake, direct eye contact. "Ethan Colton," he introduced himself. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Nelson." "Jake," I corrected automatically. Dad was Mr. Nelson, that formal, unapproachable figure who measured success in billable hours and family tradition. I'd promised myself my company would be different. Over the next few weeks, I noticed Ethan's work ethic mirrored my own. First in, last out. Problem solving with a tenacity that impressed even our senior developers. During one late-night debugging session, I ordered pizza for the remaining team members. "What made you apply here instead of one of the bigger players?" I asked between bites. He seemed to consider his answer carefully. "I like how you built this place. No inherited advantage, no big connections, just smart ideas and hard work." There was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. That's rare. If only Dad could see this. A talented young developer choosing my risky venture over established firms. Dad, who'd once told me at a family dinner that real businesses aren't built by college dropouts with pipe dreams. 6 months later, NeuroSync had grown to 50 employees. Our latest software update had doubled our client base, and I'd just signed our biggest contract yet. The team celebrated with champagne in the office, and I found myself watching Ethan chatting easily with the design team. He'd become one of our most valuable assets. Reliable, innovative, somehow bridging departments that had previously struggled to communicate. What I didn't realize then was how soon my professional and personal worlds would collide. and how unprepared I was for the fallout. The morning of Mom's birthday arrived with Seattle's typical overcast skies and a light drizzle that matched my mood. I packed an overnight bag, though I wasn't planning to stay at the family home. The Holiday Inn on the edge of Riverview would be my refuge if things got too tense, which they inevitably would. "You sure you don't want me to come as moral support?" Rachel asked over the phone as I tossed my bag into the trunk of my Audi, "and subject you to the Nelson family circus?" "I'm not that cruel," I laughed, but the knot in my stomach tightened. I pulled onto I-5, heading north, the familiar route stretching before me like a timeline of memories. Passing the Everett exit reminded me of driving this same road after my high school graduation, Dad lecturing me about practical college majors the entire way. By the time we reached Mount Vernon, he'd dismissed computer science as a hobby, not a career, and outlined why I should focus on business administration instead. The Welcome to Riverview sign appeared, faded and tilted slightly to the left, just like when I'd left. Population 8,742. Home of the annual Wildflower Festival and the regional high school debate champions 3 years running. Main Street hadn't changed. The same hardware store, the same diner, the same courthouse square where I'd had my first kiss behind the gazebo in 9th grade. People still decorated their porches with American flags and seasonal wreaths, still recognized each other's cars and waved as they passed. I turned onto Maple Avenue, the street where I'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd waited for the school bus, where I'd snuck out at 17 to attend my first party. The houses grew larger and more stately as I approached the East End, the good part of town, as Dad always said, where families like ours maintained appearances at all costs. And there it stood, the 2-story colonial with its perfect lawn and white trim, Dad's Lexus and Mom's Volvo in the circular driveway, along with several cars I didn't recognize, early arrivals for the birthday lunch. A banner hung between the porch columns. "Happy 60th, Deborah," in Mom's favorite shade of blue. I parked behind a Honda I didn't recognize and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Through the large bay window, I could see movement, people mingling in the living room. Somewhere in there was the family that had both shaped and rejected me. I hesitated at the door, finger hovering over the doorbell. For a split second, I considered retreating to my car and driving back to Seattle, gift undelivered. But then I heard Mom's laugh, that genuine, warm sound that had been too rare in our household, floating through the door. Before I could overthink it further, I pressed the bell. Uncle Frank opened the door, his eyebrows shooting up in poorly concealed surprise. "Jake," he said, voice carrying that same dismissive tone Dad had perfected. "Didn't expect to see you today." "It's Mom's birthday," I replied simply, stepping past him into the foyer. The house smelled the same, Mom's lavender potpourri and the lemon polish she used on the antique furniture. The conversation in the living room dimmed as I entered. Mom was sitting in her favorite armchair, a small group gathered around her. When she saw me, her eyes widened and filled with tears. She stood quickly, smoothing her dress, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. "Jake," she said, her voice wavering slightly as she crossed the room. "You came." The unspoken addition hung in the air, despite your father's wishes. Her hug was tight but brief, as if she was afraid to show too much emotion. I handed her the small wrap box. "Happy birthday, Mom." Dad was standing by the fireplace, drink in hand, deliberately focusing on his conversation with Marcus Flynn, our longtime family friend. The message was clear. I was being ignored. Classic Howard Nelson passive-aggressive tactics. Pushing open the swinging door to the kitchen, I found Amelia arranging canapes on a silver platter, her movements precise and tense. She looked up, startled. "Jake," she said, a complicated mix of emotions crossing her face. Relief, worry, something else I couldn't quite identify. "I didn't think you'd actually come after, you know." "After Dad told me not to?" I finished for her, keeping my voice low. "It's Mom's birthday. I wouldn't miss it?" She nodded, eyes darting toward the door as if afraid someone might overhear. "He's been in a mood all morning. Just be careful, okay?" Before I could ask what she meant, the kitchen door swung open, and Dad stood there, his imposing frame filling the doorway. He looked older than I remembered, more gray at the temples, deeper lines around his mouth. For a moment, No one spoke. "I see you ignored my call," he finally said, voice carefully controlled. "I came to celebrate Mom's birthday," I replied evenly. His jaw tightened. "Always have to do things your way, don't you?" Amelia's eyes darted between us, her hands frozen mid-task. The suffocating pattern was already reasserting itself. Dad disapproving, me defiant, Amelia caught in the crossfire. "Not today," I said quietly. "Today is about Mom." We migrated to the living room with trays of hors d'oeuvres, Mom's favorites that Amelia had carefully prepared. I noticed she'd made the stuffed mushrooms exactly the way Mom liked them, with extra thyme and a touch of sherry. To Jake, Uncle Frank cornered me by the bay window, lowering his voice to what he probably thought was discreet. "Still playing with computers?" He said it the way someone might refer to a child's passing interest in dinosaurs. Amusing but ultimately inconsequential. "The company's doing well," I replied neutrally, watching Dad over Frank's shoulder. He was pointedly engaging everyone except me, his laugh a little too loud when Marcus Flynn said something apparently hilarious. Olivia rescued me, sliding into our conversation with practiced ease. "Jake was just featured in Business Northwest, weren't you?" she said, eyes twinkling. "Cover story about disruptors in the tech industry. I saved a copy. Your mother follows all your press," she whispered as Frank wandered off in search of a refill. "Keeps a scrapbook in her sewing room. Don't tell your father I told you." The thought of Mom secretly collecting articles about my career sent a pang through my chest. How many milestones had we missed sharing because of this endless Cold War with my father? The doorbell rang just as the main course was being served. Amelia jumped slightly, her fork clattering against her plate. "That must be my friend," she said, standing quickly. "I'll get it." Mom looked surprised. "You invited someone else?" "I didn't set an extra place." "It's fine. I told him we might still be having appetizers. We can make room." Amelia hurried from the dining room, smoothing her dress nervously. Dad frowned, clearly annoyed at the disruption to his perfectly orchestrated celebration. "Who is this friend exactly?" he asked Mom, who shrugged in response. "She mentioned someone new she's been seeing," Mom offered. "I think it might be getting serious." We heard voices in the hallway, Amelia's nervous laugh, a male voice responding, then footsteps approaching the dining room. "Everyone," Amelia announced as she reappeared in the doorway, "I'd like you to meet someone special." The man who stepped into view beside her was tall, well-dressed, and smiling confidently. As he scanned the room, his eyes landed on me, and his smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before recovering. "Hello," he said pleasantly to the room before his gaze locked with mine. "Hello, boss." The room went deadly silent as every head turned from him to me and back again. In that frozen moment, as recognition dawned on every face, I realized just how little I knew about what had been happening in my own company and my own family. Time seemed to stand still as Ethan's words hung in the air. "Hello, boss." Two simple words that shattered the carefully maintained facade of the Nelson family gathering. I stared at him, then at Amelia, whose face had gone pale despite her attempt at a confident smile. Ethan Colton, my promising new developer, the quiet coding genius who'd become an integral part of NeuroSync over the past 6 months, was dating my sister. And from the looks of it, no one at this table had known the connection. No one except the two of them. Dad recovered first, his fork clattering against fine china as he set it down with deliberate control. "Boss," he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. The kind of quiet that had always preceded his worst explosions when we were kids. Amelia stepped forward, her hand finding Ethan's in a gesture that seemed both defiant and seeking support. "Dad, Mom, everyone, this is Ethan, my boyfriend of 4 months." She took a breath. "And yes, he works for Jake's company." Mom's hand fluttered to her necklace, her nervous tell since I was little. "Well, what a coincidence," she managed, social graces kicking in despite her obvious shock. "Not a coincidence," Dad said flatly, pushing back his chair slightly. His gaze hardened as he looked at Ethan. "How long have you been working for my son?" Ethan stood his ground, though I could see the slight tension in his shoulders. 6 months, sir. I'm part of the development team for NeuroSync's new logistics platform." 6 months, Dad repeated, turning his glare to Amelia. "And you've been dating for 4. Rather convenient timing. The implication was clear. Dad thought this was some kind of setup. A plant. An infiltration of the precious Nelson family circle by his wayward son. Amelia's cheeks flushed. It wasn't like that. We met when I visited Jake's office to drop off his birthday gift in January. You remember, Mom? The one you helped me pick out but didn't want to mail? Mom nodded weakly, avoiding Dad's gaze. Another small betrayal in his eyes, no doubt, that Mom and Amelia had maintained contact with me behind his back. I had no idea they knew each other, I said, finding my voice at last. Ethan never mentioned having a connection to Riverview, let alone to my family. Dad was too far gone. The carefully constructed narrative of his life, successful patriarch, betrayed by his ungrateful son, now threatened by this new development. So we're supposed to believe, Dad said coldly, that out of all the men in Seattle, my daughter just happened to fall for an employee of my son's company? A company that exists solely because Jake turned his back on our family business? Amelia looked at me, then back at Dad, something shifting in her expression. Whatever she saw in that moment seemed to strengthen her resolve. She straightened her shoulders. Maybe I chose Ethan precisely because he works for Jake, she said quietly. Because he's part of something innovative and exciting, something built on merit rather than obligation and tradition. Mom gasped softly. In all the years of family conflict, Amelia had never openly taken my side against Dad. She had been the peacekeeper, the good daughter, the one who stayed, until now. Amelia! Mom's voice cracked with shock. The perfect birthday celebration was crumbling before her eyes. The carefully arranged flowers, the gourmet meal, the social facade, all collapsing under the weight of long-buried truths. Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I think we need to have a family discussion. In private. His eyes swept dismissively over Ethan. Family only. Mated, Amelia said, her voice small but firm. Whatever you have to say, Ethan can hear it. I found myself standing too, moved by some protective instinct toward my sister I hadn't realized was still so strong. Let's all calm down. This is supposed to be Mom's birthday celebration. Some celebration? Dad scoffed. First you show up against my explicit wishes and now this ambush. Ambush? I repeated incredulously. I had no idea about any of this. Oh, please, Dad sneered. You expect me to believe you didn't orchestrate this whole thing? Hiring this young man to get close to your sister, to spy on our family? Why are you really so angry, Dad? I asked, suddenly tired of the pretense. Is it really about Ethan and Amelia? Or is it that you can't stand that I've built something successful without you? Dad's face flushed. You think that tech startup of yours impresses me? Playing with apps and gadgets? I've built a real business, a legacy firm with a reputation that spans generations. A legacy you were determined to force on Jake whether he wanted it or not, Amelia interjected, surprising everyone again. You never once asked what he wanted, and what would you know about it? Dad turned his anger toward her. You've been the loyal daughter, the one who understood family obligation, who didn't run off to play entrepreneur the minute things got tough. Amelia's laugh was sharp and unexpected. Loyal? Is that what you think? Dad, I've been quietly suffering through family dinners for years, listening to you twist the truth about Jake's business, pretending I don't follow NeuroSig's success in the trade journals, hiding the fact that I'm proud of my brother because no one in this family actually talks, Amelia replied, her voice softening as she looked at our mother. We just performed the roles we're assigned. Dad stared at her, momentarily speechless. The family dynamic, carefully maintained for decades, was shifting before our eyes. The silence that followed felt like the calm before a Category 5 hurricane. Dad's face had gone from red to an alarming shade of white, his knuckles tight as he gripped the edge of the dining table. No, Dad's voice was ice cold. Since we're all being so honest today, let's really be honest. His eyes locked onto mine with such intensity I could almost feel the physical impact. You want to know the real reason I've been so hard on you, Jake? It's not just that you rejected the family business. It's that I saw in you something I've always feared in myself. Mom's head snapped up. Howard, the desire to break free, to build something different. Dad's voice had taken on a strange, hollow quality I'd never heard before. I had dreams once too, before I joined my father's firm. Before I became the dutiful son, the revelation hung in the air like smoke. In all our battles, in all the years of conflict, it had never occurred to me that my father might have once been like me, trapped between obligation and ambition. But I did what was expected, he continued, his voice hardening again. I put family first. I built on what was given to me instead of chasing pipe dreams. And you? He pointed at me. You just walked away. You pushed me away, I corrected quietly. There's a difference. Dad thinks your business is going to fail, Amelia suddenly blurted out. He tells everyone it's just a matter of time before you come crawling back. Before Dad could answer, Uncle Frank shifted uncomfortably. Your uncle and I discussed the possibility of investing in a competing logistics software company last year, Dad admitted stiffly. A more established firm with a proven track record, Westridge Systems, I said flatly, naming our biggest competitor. You invested in Westridge. Dad's silence was confirmation enough. I came to you first, I said, the old wound reopening. 2 years ago, when we were looking for second-round funding, I offered you first chance to invest in Neurosync. You laughed me out of your office. Because it was a risk, Dad exploded. An unnecessary risk when there were safer, more established options. That risk just signed a multi-million-dollar contract with Amazon, I shot back. That risk is now valued at 8 times what it was when I asked for your investment. You didn't just miss an opportunity, Dad, you actively worked against me. 3 hours later, the house had emptied of guests. We sat in the living room, the 4 Nelsons plus Ethan, in a silence that felt different from the tense quiet of earlier. This silence was exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a house that had been pressure-sealed for years had finally been opened to fresh air. I'm sorry about your birthday, Mom, Amelia said, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea. This wasn't exactly the celebration you deserved. Mom smiled wryly. Oh, I don't know. After 37 years of marriage, watching your husband finally have an honest conversation with your children feels like quite a gift. Dad had been quiet since our confrontation, processing everything that had been revealed. The mask of the authoritative patriarch had slipped, revealing a man grappling with the consequences of his choices. Your mother deserves better than what happened today, he finally said. We should reschedule, do this properly. Maybe somewhere neutral next time, I suggested. Seattle, perhaps. I know a few good restaurants. Dad nodded slowly, the suggestion hanging between us. Not just a meal, but a step toward rebuilding what had been broken. That might work. As Amelia and Ethan prepared to leave, I caught Ethan by the arm. Take care of her, I said quietly. And Monday morning, my office. We have a few things to discuss. He nodded, understanding the dual message. I was speaking as both brother and boss. I'll be there. When I returned to the living room, Dad was standing by the fireplace, looking at the family photos on the mantel. He picked up one I'd never seen before. Me at my college graduation, a moment he'd attended under protest and we'd barely spoken through. Your company, he said without turning around. Neurosync. The name means connected thinking, right? Something like that, I confirmed. Surprised he'd looked into it enough to know the meaning, he set the photo down carefully. Perhaps that's what this family needs, more connected thinking. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a promise. But from Howard Nelson, it was a beginning. As I drove back to my hotel later that evening, the spring sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about how differently this day had turned out than I'd expected. I'd come prepared for battle, for the same old wounds to be reopened. Instead, we'd finally lanced infections that had been festering for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. That was insane. Call you tomorrow? P.S. Please don't fire my boyfriend. I smiled and typed back, wouldn't dream of it. He's got good taste in Nelsons. Family healing wouldn't happen overnight. Dad wouldn't suddenly become a different person, and years of hurt couldn't be erased in one afternoon. But truth, painful as it had been, had finally broken through the walls we'd built. Mom had her birthday wish after all. All of us in the same room, not just physically present, but emotionally honest for the first time in years.